Another of our OWASP October series, joined by Scott Bly here, and in a moment, Avi will be joining us. So thanks everyone for joining us.
Hello.
We got a great, community here, Scott. And it's
I love
funny,
it.
Scott, like when I was preparing for this, for some reason, ChatGPT kept replacing your name with Scotty. So I kind of feel like you're Scotty Bly now to me.
That's all right. That's what my wife calls me. It's okay.
Scotty, all right. Everyone knows that now.
Yeah, it's okay.
Um,
There are worse things to know.
There are worse things to know. So, anyways, hey, soon enough, we should have Avi come join us. Today, we're talking about OWASP 3, Broken Object Property Level Authorization, which is a huge mouthful. This is, to me, one of the most confusing of the top 10. And so I'm really keen to have these two guys on the session to help us walk through it. We got Scott Bly, we got Avi. Both are from SIS Cyber. Thank you for all the all the confetti. It's very nice. We appreciate that. But guys, give us a little bit of background. You're both ex no name guys, so you know a lot about API security. You're both at SIS Cyber. You're actually offering our community a special bonus here, which you can access through that QR code. But Scott, why don't we start with you? Just let us know a little bit about your background and SIS and this whole free assessment thing.
Sure. Sounds good. Thank you. So why don't we cover the free assessment after Avi does his intro, but also I'll kick off the introductions. I'm Scott Bly, still getting over the tiny remains of a cold, so I may cough repeatedly. Forgive me for that if you don't mind. I run the cybersecurity professional services practice here at SIS Cyber. And I've got, let's see, you mentioned no name security. I was there for a little while and really helped a lot of customers, very large customers, some of the largest that they had, to operationalize API security tooling and to be able to understand what sort of problems they're seeing in their environment, from inventory management to posture management, runtime security, are bad guys doing bad things at a bad time in a shift right context, all the way to testing like what you guys have with the AppIsec tool, which is amazing, in a shift left capacity. So I've seen a lot of what can go wrong in an API security context, and I really have enjoyed that process of helping customers to fix those issues. And that's a lot of what we do here at SIS Cyber as well. Prior to No Name, I was at AWS, where I ran a couple of teams supporting some of the largest AWS customers. And I also ran a security program there. I've been a solutions architect in cybersecurity. I've been an IT director. I've run a consulting company in the past. So I've worn a bunch of different hats in technology over the years. And I'm really, really happy to now have spent the last couple of years in my real comfort zone, which is professional services, providing white glove treatment and really taking care of people, right? That's, I think, my most favorite part about working in the technology space, is helping people deal with this. And a lot of times we're like the wizards in the back casting the dark voodoo magic spells, because people don't understand what we're talking about sometimes. And so there's a lot of trust that's placed in us, which I take very seriously and that we take seriously as an organization. And I really like helping people to understand what's going on, which is why I love all of the webinars that you do, Dan, and that we get to participate in these, is because it's sharing that education. And in fact, when I joined No Name and needed to learn about API security and really get up to speed on it, Dan Barahona, everybody, was the first person that taught me API security stuff. So
Oh my God,
you're
it's
learning
terrifying.
from the best.
I
All
should
right, so
mention,
that's it about me. Avi,
okay,
go ahead.
yeah, go ahead,
Hi,
Avi.
everyone. First of all, excited to be here. My name is Avi Ivgi, and I'm the Director of Cybersecurity at SIS Cyber. Um, my job is to lead our research and development efforts around CloudSec, AppSec, and APIsec. And it's funny but sad, I'm excited to be here because this is an amazing topic, but sad because someone has to get hacked for us to be here. So
Yeah.
hopefully today we'll get to cover that extremely interesting topic, see some use cases, and understand more around why it happened, how can we detect it, and how to avoid it in the future.
It's going to be a really interesting session. So everyone, please get your questions and comments ready. We have two absolute stellar experts here. I should mention that Scott is also an instructor at AppSec University. He's the author and creator of our DevSecOps course, which is really amazing. So,
More
so
for
let's
us.
dive right in. Let's dive right in. Okay, so the first thing we like to do is, what is OWASP number 3? And so I'm going to pull up a few things here, and I'll kick it off, and then I'm going to need you guys to help explain, because this one is confusing. And as you may know, OWASP they created the first API top 10 in 2019. And in 2023, they updated that. They added, removed, and merged. And this is an example of a merge. So they took OWASP API 3 from 2019 and API number 6, so excess data exposure and mass assignment, combined them into what is now OWASP 3, okay? So it's really, there's two different concepts here. To me, they have always felt distinct, but talking to Avi actually pointed out to me that they're actually related. So we're gonna need to understand that. And what do we got here? This is what OWASP has to say about the exploitability. It's easy, detectability easy, interesting, technical, moderate, business specific. And I think our next slide, I don't want to spend too much time in here. I think this one's quite interesting, right? So what is an example at a high level of excess data exposure or mass assignment according to OWASP? So for excess data exposure, an endpoint that exposes properties of an object that are considered sensitive but should not be read by the user. Okay. And then mass assignment is an endpoint that allows a user to change, add, or delete the value of a sensitive object's property. Okay. And we're going to go through an example, a pretty incredible example next, but I'm going to ask Avi, help us add some color here to what we're seeing here from the OWASP site.
Absolutely. I'm not in love with the language, but I love the effort. So they put a lot of effort trying to describe something very colorful in a very, black and white manner. So when we talk about excessive data exposure, think about an object. Let's say that a user is an object. The user can have username, let's say first name, last name, username, password, and an email, right? The very basic 5, 6 properties of an object, right? Just like a t-shirt could be an object and it has size, color, texture, and whatnot.
And Avi, just to break it down one step further, when you're talking about an object, you're talking about something referenced from a database or from a piece of code that's being sent across the wire.
So yes, and at the same time, we can say no-ish, because object can be anything.
Okay.
Everything is an object. Is it a useful object? Is it an object from an API? No, but today everything in a browser is an object. But for our use case, we're talking about a JSON object, a piece of data that was returned from a service. It could be a static database, which is a text file, could be anything, but we receive data. Now, from now on, that data is a part of a model, and it means that that data is an object, and that object has properties. So if you go back to a user, the user is the object, and the properties are, is it an admin? Is it valid? Is it active? Is it expired? Last registered? Date of sign up? Date updated? Male, female, age? All these are properties. Now, if you think about it, to register, you need a few basic things. Let's say username and a password. No more than that. These usually, username is usually unique. Password can be repeat itself, but it's all good. So these are the basics. Now, guess what? Usually, services want you to register pretty quick. So they're not going to ask you 5,000 questions. They're going to ask you to username and a password, sign in. After that, you can actually go to a profile page and update your profile, enrich it by adding more properties to your object. Now, in a flat design, all these properties will be injected into the same object, which means if it's a MongoDB database and you have your own document, now your document is flat, but enriched with many properties. Now, let's say I log in a response from the database, I should get a token, maybe active, but that's it. I don't need to see my username because I know it. I just logged in. I don't need to see my my birth date, my social security. I just logged in and I want to browse the website. If when I log in the payload of the response, I get a lot of data that I don't need for the use of authentication, that's excessive data exposure. I don't need it. Now, where is it even more obvious that it's not needed? Let's say that there is a forum, right? I logged into my profile, I go to the forum, I post a message. The message was successfully posted. Now you go to the actual forum page and you see all the latest posts. what you see in the UI, it's not always the same as what the API responds, right? So the API call, if you can imagine it, let's say API v1 posts list. So it lists all the posts. Now, in the UI, you see the actual title and the text. But in the API response, if you look at the network and you see the payload, you might see the user who reported it, his email, and a lot of other interesting things that no one needs to see, that they bring no value to the UI, to the conversation, and all that good stuff. So that's a very clear example of excessive data exposure.
Pause
Scott.
for 1 second. I just conducted an unauthorized activity. So
I was
this may
wondering
be
who's
an
hacking
example.
who's hacking our event here.
I may be conducting mass assignment right now. We'll talk about that in a minute. I thought it might be nice to just check in with the audience. Excuse my cough again, sorry, and see if this is tracking, because these are kind of tricky tricky concepts to grasp, and I just thought we'd check in and see, does that description, does that explanation of excessive data exposure, does it make sense? So I threw a poll in. I don't know if I did it right or not. I just did
I don't know if you did either, but we'll find out.
So everybody, if you can go look at the poll and see if you can submit a response, we'll just take a quick show of hands and see, does it make sense?
So while you guys do that, it's important to understand that excessive data exposure, so far, it's not tied to if the user is authenticated or authorized. It's just someone decided to provide more information that is needed.
I threw up this one from Venmo, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard me talk about this one before, but to me, this is my example of excess data exposure, and hopefully it's accurate. You guys can correct me. So Venmo had a feature on their homepage that would show you real-time transactions, kind of to show how like active their platform is, right? And they probably only wanted to, it wasn't really there for informational. It was more like, look how all the interesting things. So it would have had like a first name, no like PII, no email addresses or home addresses or transaction details and so forth. But in the API call that powered that homepage, it actually returned the entire record, right? So the homepage only needed 3 fields, but the API call returns 25 fields. Is that an example of excess data exposure?
Yes, not only that, it's also shows the big difference between the design of the API and the actual use of the API. So they wanted to show something very simple, and they returned more than what the request needed. Not to mention that it was not even, it was properly authenticated. I think it wasn't.
I think no. You see here, it says it was a public API, no authorization.
So you can see that few failures here. And it's kind of sad because this is not new, right? If you follow the basic OWASP top 10, you can see that no tests were done to verify and validate authentication and authorization. And then if you just go through the list one by one, it takes you, let's say, an hour with verification and validation. They could have avoided it, and they haven't.
Well, yeah, I think one of the best practices for excess data exposure is this concept of data minimization, right? And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but like, don't return more than you need to. And Randall, great to see you, my friend. I think you nailed it, right? What you see on the screen isn't necessarily what the API is returning, right? It could be much more than that. And Roger, I don't know how to decrypt your message, so maybe someone can help us with that. Let's see what we got here.
It was a token generator, right? Except that it starts with all those C's. So I suspect he fell asleep or his cat jumped on his keyboard.
Oh, it could be. It could be. What do we already got? Some good stuff coming in here. Pete Saunders, issue seems to be REST versus GraphQL. REST is a bit lazy. Ooh, that's kind of. Yeah. What do you guys say about that?
I tell you what. There are some REST API frameworks that by design will return nothing unless you specify which field, which means which property of the object you want to be returned. So by design, they return everything, and then you have to filter things out in the UI, which is not great.
Yeah.
At the same time, you can change the design to return only what you ask for, And then unless you ask, you don't get it.
Right.
Even then, it leaves room for just ask for everything because it's an easy copy paste. So I don't want to blame the framework. I want to also blame the developer. That you can blame someone else. But right now, whoever writes the code is in charge of how it's going to operate. So yes, now with GraphQL, I also agree. At the same time, with GraphQL, you can also copy paste, right? Because you write the query in the code. So again, you can make the mistake of asking all the fields. And
well, I think this is Abraham's comment. GraphQL can also commit excess data exposure.
yes,
Right?
introspection. Yes.
Yeah, right. I found tracking numbers for orders with GraphQL. There you go. From Nicholas.
Let's pause for 1 second there, just to go back to the poll, because there were a few people who said they didn't get it yet. If you answered no to the poll and still feel like you're not getting it, throw a question into the chat. There are no stupid questions. This is a safe place, and we're happy to talk about this stuff. Want to make sure that folks are getting it. One example that I have, Avi did a great job of explaining it, because anything can be an object. But the way that I typically think about this in my kind of, couple steps down from Avi in the technical domain, I think of it as a single item in a database, right? In a regular SQL style database where the table is, you got your rows and you got your columns. A single object would be that user identity that Avi was talking about. So you got your user ID, either that's a name or a proper identity number or something like that for the user ID. And then you've got address, male, female, all the other properties that go across for that specific row. When the call is made to the API and it looks up that user account information and it pulls back that data, as Avi said, all that's needed is you're logged in or you're not, which isn't even from this table. But if the API, as I think Abraham or Randall pointed out, that you are concerned that the feature won't work if you don't return all that data, the developer returns all the data for that particular ID because the call was get the user ID. And it says, okay, here's all my information that's in that table. And they send all that across. That would be an example of excessive data exposure because it's all directly tied to that. Now you can
Scott,
structure. Wait, go ahead, Avi.
I think it's your select all versus select just the columns that you need, just the fields that you need.
Fair enough.
But now let me build on Randall's comment here, right? Sometimes devs will use the same endpoint for different features. And this resonates with me. Like, I don't want to create 10 different APIs for 10 different use cases. It's all the same table, the same data. Can't I just create one and then rely on the developers to like do the right thing and all this kind of stuff? But then that core API is still kind of over permissioned. So
that's absolutely right. We see it more often than not where I don't want to use the word lazy. It's just convenient to reuse and recycle API endpoints for multiple purposes. Not only data-wise, we see it to a point where sometimes you have a new framework and you also have a legacy system, and they both need data from the same API. Sometimes we even see two different types of authentication methods against one API, all the way to a point that they even both fail and the API is accessible unauthorized. So it goes all the way from excessive data exposure to an unauthenticated endpoint. And usually we see it where two different platforms try to access the same API for maybe different bits of information. And on top of that, different types of authentication. So absolutely valid. We see it all the time.
Let's I want to get to mass assignment here, but man, awesome conversation here. Go ahead.
Pedro asked a really interesting question here. He said, may I ask what is regarded as excessive? Is it any amount of data that is not by design or intended? And somebody threw in 100, yes, that they agree with that. And yes, however, I would take it a step further. And if we put on our broader security hat for a moment and we think about the principle of least privilege, when we're thinking about security permissions and design, you can take that same principle and apply it to data access. And that's really where you should be going here. You may have designed or intended for your API to cough up 5 of the properties, But is that truly what is necessary when you think about it from the principle of least privilege? You want the least amount of data handed over because you don't want to give bad guys that gain access to this capability anything more than is critically needed for that specific function. So principle of least privilege, maybe principle of least data access, a new Scott term. But I think that principle applies there. Avi, Dan, would you agree with that?
I think the principle of least privilege, it's to me, it's another flavor of zero trust or whatever, right? We talk a lot in the fundamentals course, like a lot of times we rely on the UI to do that filtering, right? Like all this data comes back, we're only going to show the 3 fields, but all that data is still there. There's a remarkable example I talked about a month ago, where in the password reset function, right, there's an API to reset your password, and it actually returned the reset code in the API response. I mean,
yeah, I've talked about that
there's
one
a
too.
better example of excess data exposure than that.
That was that social media site, right?
I can't even remember. But yeah, here you go. Here's the password reset since you're here, right? But let's pivot here, and maybe someone can take a look at Lav, Kali, these questions. So Avi, Scott, if you could take a look, I'm going to flip to this Formula One example. And if any of you have seen, I've been posting about this a lot on LinkedIn. This is a great example of mass assignment, I believe. You guys keep me honest here, right? So this is another great example from Ian Carroll and Sam Curry and Kyle Nugley, just legendary hackers, honestly, in my book. Here's what happened, right? They went to Formula One. There's a driver portal, of course. If you're with Hamilton, you got to log in and get your paycheck or something. I don't know, but at any rate, they found the FIA website and started messing around with the API calls, and they just basically reverse engineered this role. And frankly, I think if you read I think you've read it carefully, Avi. They more or less guessed at this role construction and said, all right, ID is 1, description is admin role, name is admin. And they sent it on. They basically are saying, me, Sam Curry, I'm defining myself as an admin. And I guess that is the mass assignment. They are creating this record, or they're updating this record to change his role type. And of course, it shouldn't have worked, but it did. And they, as the admin, were then able to do things like access Max Verstappen's passport records, which they did not. Once they realized they could, they immediately stopped, notified FIA, who then very promptly fixed the issue. But Avi, help us unpack this. And are we looking at a mass assignment here?
So we're looking at a few things that went wrong. And they were lucky, but it wasn't just luck. And also in the live demo, I'll show how these things are not pure luck. When you, let's assume that you do nothing wrong. All you do is you register, you log in, you browse through pages. But what you do, you collect all of the traffic, all the API calls, requests and responses. You just collect them. And one of the most, I would say, sensitive objects that you can have in a platform like that, it's the user object. And as we know, developers, sometimes by design, they do a really good job security-wise. So they'll give you just what you want. At the same time, at some point, you will find more API endpoints that will shed more light and colors about the user object. So for example, if you for a second imagine that the roles property does not exist here, you basically see a normal object. And let's say that I subscribe to a gym membership, right? And then my membership could be silver, gold, premium, deluxe, creme de la creme. I have only opportunity maybe once to do that when I register, or when I register, I log in, I go to membership, and then I can upgrade my membership. Or, I go to the kiosk or the register, ask someone, I swipe my card, they're gonna upgrade my permissions level, my membership status. And what we see here is that they actually browse the site and they figure out that at some point, oh, there is a roles property attached to my object. I had no idea one exists. So what they did, they copied the string admin, and then they searched it in the entire JavaScript files on the website. So they download all the JavaScript, and then they find and search admin, and then they found an if else or select case. And they saw if an admin, if an owner, if a broadcaster is something, then give this, give that. They say, okay, interesting. Now, when you look at a JavaScript query of the object, then it's easy to see the structure of the object. So once they figure out the structure that's supposed to be under roles, and roles is an array of more objects. By the way, admin, and you see roles is an array, you can be more than admin. You can wear multiple hats. If they have a reporter, if they have whatever, you can do that. So what they did, they now know that there is a new property that can be injected. The question is, which endpoint is the broken one, which will allow me to upgrade my status? And we'll see it in the demo. For example, I have 2 endpoints. If you know what, before the demo, let's think about it for a second. The only way for me to update something is looking for an endpoint with a post. So I create something new from scratch, or an endpoint with put, where I'm actually updating an existing object. So all you have to do now is figure out, can I update my object by injecting more mass data assignment, injecting more things than what the UI, the form in the UI allows me? Or I have to recreate the object from scratch, meaning doing registration. So once they go through all these, fuzz and try and retry all these endpoints, they found the one that was successful. So what you do, you update the object, and then you log out and log in, and during the login, all the if else, and one of them was an admin, and they got a different UI.
Yeah, amazing.
And basically, that's what happened.
And one just a little side detour. You talked about inspecting the JavaScript. So is this a recon technique to look at the JavaScript code to look?
Yes. So that's a right assumption, and you're absolutely correct with that. So the whole idea is to see what else is out there. Now, people make mistakes. Developers are among them. So when they write the code, they might not always have security in mind, which means, for example, the adversaries here, the good people, were searching JavaScript for admin. If the word admin was obfuscated, it's not the best security on the planet, but it would have worked. It will take them maybe 10 times the amount of time to find it, right?
Sure.
Because usually what you do, you try to get everyone to give up by making everything a little bit harder on them. Now, as a hacker, I have sometimes only a few seconds to try something. If it's working great, if not, I move on to the next thing. Yeah. The next thing could be a different website, so you were lucky this time. But if the next thing was another JavaScript, and it's very simple to search and find string in files. So that's what they did. They did reconnaissance. Very simple. Select all the JavaScript. You can basically filter the browser or have a proxy to download all the JavaScripts, search through them. And the whole idea is to get more information. The more, the better. And that ease your way into that exploitation. So we saw that excessive data exposure, which means a user that is not an admin saw that roles property exists. So excessive data exposure, which led to, let's try mass assignment, which means I added more information than I was supposed to or should be allowed to. So roles should be a property that could only be updated by a user that is logged in and is an admin in the platform. So authorization failed, mass assignment, because even if mass assignment exists, which means I can give you more, there should be a mechanism that says, you're not an admin, I'm not going to edit.
There's an example I use a lot from Bumble where there was a free account, paid account, and I've always described it as broken function level authorization, OWASP 5. because they expose that put method on the account type endpoint. So not only could I check what account I have, I could also modify through that put request. Okay.
Correct.
And to
So the
me,
function was put, and the authorization for that function was broken. This is why it's a buffer.
that's right, broken function level. But is this not also mass assignment?
Yes. So let's put it straight. It's not black and white. They all commingle.
Yeah.
Which means mass assignment, it's me being able to add more object or more properties to my object and send it through the wire to the API endpoint. Now, the API endpoint should not take the entire object in the payload, just save it as is. It should take only what it needs, and even then sanitize every value, making sure it fits the specs or the model for that object, and only then save it. Now, even before, let's say you verify and validate, all data is legit, everything is good. Now, are you allowed to actually do that? So a lot of things fail there. One, the endpoint was allowing more data than it should. It took the entire data as is, and then skipped, missed, or failed to properly verify and validate that the user is authorized to do that. And this is why they're all connected.
Can I add a bit of clarification there? I think broken function level authorization is more about the capability of the user. So it's user focused. Can that user, in this case, escalate to admin privileges? This broken object property level authorization is more about the object itself, right? So we're saying, can you make a change to this specific object even when you are still logged in as the non-admin? So I would say that this particular example, I would throw out the philosophical argument that maybe we're crossing over into BAFLA when they elevate their privileges. But if I can log in as Scott, and I can still make changes to that object, even though I'm still logged in as me and I haven't changed my function, that would be closer to a mass assignment. So I think we might be blurring the line a little bit, but as you point out, Avi, these are just classifications. It's not like there's some set of laws of physics where broken object property level. These are just folks trying to describe the problems that we see. So it's all fuzzy. I want to change the subject just a tiny bit before we get into Avi's demo. If you scroll up in the chat a little bit, you will see that we have a very special guest in our audience named Dan Temkin. Now, I've known Dan for a long time, and he is one of the rock stars of API management and security. And he has thrown a hand grenade into our chat. Avi, are you ready for an expert level question?
All of a sudden, for some reason, I can't see well.
Okay, so Dan says, I hope that you talk a bit about balancing least privilege access, optimal state, for a given consumer scope against API complexity, such as design and testing, etc., as well as reuse with different consumers requiring different accessed scope. Do the speakers have a solution preference solved at the core business data service, centralized or decentralized PDP, I'm not even sure what Dan means by that, integrated into the API implementation or decoupled from the service implementation, such as higher up the stack? I think this is related to the question that Tope asked later, which was, so it would be ideal to use a server-side language to perform the UI parsing rather than a client-side language. But Avi, I'll defer to your judgment. This is all very much developer speak, and I don't fully grasp it, but I look forward to hearing whether it makes sense to you.
So I think there are a few things here, if I got this right, so I'm going to give it a try. There's client-side rendering and server-side rendering, meaning if all the math and the magic is done on the server side, the user will never see on the client side, which is the UI, what was done in order to populate the data. They won't see the API calls. All they get is a static HTML, JavaScript, CSS page. Nothing to massage, nothing to manipulate, because all the API calls were run on the server side. So that's one. You can still learn some things, but not much to do with it because you don't even know which API endpoints are out there. So that's one thing. It's not always possible because sometimes you need data from the user side, and that's a conversation by itself. So it is possible, you can do it. It eliminates a lot of things, but creates new issues because you can still expose more data than you need to. It's a JavaScript object on the client side. So if I give the UI the entire JavaScript object, then all the data is there. It's not an API call, but the data is there. At the same time, let's talk about APIs, GraphQL, REST API, and Scott, even iPaaS. Now, the idea is that if you think about it, and I hope I got this right, Dan. If not, please disconnect my Wi-Fi and make me stop. If we could visualize a magical world where we can design APIs to be extremely secure and extremely efficient, I would say, and for 1 second, let's not name it as the REST API or GraphQL or whatnot. There's something new out there. I would be able to ask for something, give me user information, give me A, B, C, and D. That's all I need. And for that to be translated into a technical query that maybe will use one API, maybe we'll use 20 different APIs to give me the data. And each and every piece of information, for example, could have a tag. Only that type of user with that type of permission can get it. So when I say, give me everything, I'll basically only get what I'm allowed to get. So every object and every property has its own permissions and the minimum required authorization for you to see it. So we have more pieces everywhere, and the query is way more dynamic. It's going to be harder to make a mistake by saying select all and download and get everything and download, right? Because someone or something is monitoring and making sure everything is set up correctly. Because right now, I have access to my user object. I'm also getting access to all of my properties. Now, REST APIs, using REST APIs is going to make it very hard for me to now add more layers of security on top of that to eliminate every property in the object. And this is why we're seeing these things. Existing tools and frameworks are not very great at it. If you remember 20 years ago, APIs were for ones and zeros, true or false, on, off, right? Yes, no. Today we use it way more than maybe I could say what it was intended for. And this is why we're seeing all these issues and challenges. We took something that was very old and we brought it into 2025, and we're still trying to use it to the max. This is why we have things like GraphQL and maybe more, I would say, API services that we no longer use. Right? So we have now REST and GraphQL. I think only a few use SOAP, if anyone even knows what SOAP is. Right? So this is why some technologies were deprecated or they were very good for certain tasks. And this is why we see what we see today. And then I hope I did justice and trying to answer the question.
The legendary Dan, the other Dan. And please let us know. And glad to have you here. But we're gonna run out of time here, and I want to make sure we get to your demo. You got something that you want to show us here, and we always love to have some hands-on keyboard for these sessions. Are you ready to rock?
I'm gonna load my screen and cross my fingers that it works. You tell me if you see it.
All right, very good.
So I just shared my screen, and you tell me if you guys can see my screen.
Let's bring. Where is
Not
your
yet.
screen?
While you're doing that, somebody asked another quick question. Do SIM solutions play a role in identifying excessive data exposure, or should that be checked on development side? I threw an answer into the chat, so if Avi gets his screen share to work, everybody please read my couple of answers there. Oh, there he goes. So
I can see that you can see my screen. Okay.
Yeah, we can see your screen now. We got Vampy. So everybody take a look at that. It's an interesting question. Read through that. Avi, the floor is yours.
Sounds good. So hi, everyone. We'll be looking at Vampy. Nothing sophisticated. The reason I chose it, it's so anyone, anywhere could actually repeat what I'll be showing today. So VAMP
Avi,
is
what is VAMP? Explain
Scott,
that.
I'm getting there.
Cool.
As you can see, it's a vulnerable API designed and was given to us free by OWASP Top 10. So the whole idea about VAMP is to teach you and educate you about the different vulnerabilities and, of course, the top 10 in ways that how the mistakes were made during the design, the deployment, and all that good stuff. So VAMP gives you a way to explore and research and do your own recon, and in your free time, just use and abuse that API in order to educate yourself more about how these things actually look in real life. And what we'll do today, remember that Scott, privilege escalation that the users for the F1, the Formula F1 did, we're going to try and do the same today. So these are the endpoints that are provided in the documentation. But as you all know, this is a REST API, and they also provided us with a Swagger file, and I think even open API specs. So let's do some reconnaissance. Let's see how it goes. So we are talking about broken object property level authorization. So the question is, what is a property? Now, in order to understand what property, we're going to look at some files and we get the idea. Although you see the answer here, let's see how I came up with it. Because things should not be obvious. It should be easy to find. So looking at the spec, you can see this is an open API spec for VAMP. I'm going to skip a lot of things here and I'll go straight to where we're going to go. Okay, so we're going to be looking at users or the user object. And how do I know it's an object? If you look at the design, we have a user object, which is an array of more users, which are objects. And these objects have properties. So now we know what a property is. And we know email is a property and username is a property. That property, there's a model for the user object, and the model says that a property of email, it's a string, and that's an example. So far, we should all be on the same page. So what have we learned so far? That there's a user object, and that object has two properties, email and username. Great. Now, we also know that in every platform, you need to register, correct? So when a user registers, this is where the first time it's supposed to, we're going to create the user object. So let's see what more properties we have. We have a username, password, and an email. So we keep enriching the user object with more properties. So far, so good. So now we know that the user object has these four properties: email, username, password. Now, we're going to be exploring this one, and we see how did we come up with that? Does that make sense? Did I just imagine something, or I tried 500,000 properties until we got this one? Now, when we talk about specs, right now, this is a spec that was given to us for research. So not everything will be exposed, yet in real life, there are some specs that are not exposed. For example, if I search for admin, you can see that there is an endpoint named me, which means give me all the information that you have about me. And for the user object, we can see there are properties and we get an admin. So the example is false. It could be true. And maybe in the API code, in the backend, by default, the value is false. So I'm not even asked to provide that the value for that property. But now we just learned that there's an admin. Now, in real life, in the spec, no one would ever give you that, right? They'll do their best to hide it. So you don't know it exists. So what else can we do to know that this thing actually exists? Now, when all you have is an API and a spec, you go fuzzing. You go and try everything. Or if it's a website and there are JavaScript, you search the JavaScript. But if not, what you do is once you log in, and let's maybe go back here to second page, you try to learn more about you. So few ways. One looking at the spec and one just trying all the API calls. So let's see how it goes. I'm going to register a new user. And by the way, this is the collection that Vampy provides you with. So I'm going to try and register a new user. So let's see. Let's register user 3. I successfully registered. Now let's get the information about me. So once I registered, let's take my username, and you're going to go to login. I logged in, I got my token, great, right? Now what else I can do? Let's get information about my user. I'm going to run it, and there you go. If you haven't seen the spec, now you can see the payload. That's excessive data exposure that tells me that there's a property admin that can be attached to my object. Great. Admin false. Now we all think, okay, how do I change it to true? Right? Because that's the gist. That's the privilege escalation giving me an admin in the platform, which is not something that I should have. So how do you go about it? Let's see. So can I get an admin, please? Scott, can I get an admin? Can you do me a favor, give me an admin? Let's see how.
Yeah.
Let's see how one might do it. So you're going to be looking for endpoints that alter data. One of them is put, the other one is post. Post usually is being used to create something from scratch, like a new user, and you add, and you post, and you purchase. Put usually alters. So let's see if I can use the email alter. So I want to change my email, and can I inject admin equals true? So can I do mass assignment for that endpoint? Let's see. We're going to go to update users. So I think it will be smart to try and log in again. Usually it times out. Let's see that it works. I got it. See, admin false. I'm going to update my email to user 3 admin, and I'm saying admin true. Now, the request went fine. Okay, no errors, no nothing. Let's see if it is correct. I'm going to log in again, retrieve my user. No, so you see the email changed, but the role didn't. Sure, right? So it didn't work. What else you do?
It didn't work because there was, why didn't it work?
Haha, few things. One, it could be that the function very well look at the authorization and I'm not allowed to update the object with that property, or there is no mass assignment vulnerability for that API, which means they don't take everything and just apply. They only take what they need.
They do input validation or something.
Input validation, sanitation, everything. They did very well on that endpoint. But guess what? They could have missed one. And as you can see, I've just gone through the steps here, and we saw that it was not great. It didn't work. So what else we do? I'm going to ask again, but this time I'm going to ask during registration. So let's create a new user. And when we registered, you saw that was the payload. I'm going to provide a new payload. This time I'm going to try adding a true using the post. And let's run it. And right, we successfully registered. Let's log in. And I'll take my user and password, and I'm going to log in. Great. Now let's see my information. Whew. True. So that's mass assignment plus broken function and excessive data exposure and BOPLA. So this is, in order to get BOPLA, all the things has to apply, and we just now saw how I registered and also setting myself as an admin.
So we need to be mindful of time here. So what I'm seeing here is there was one endpoint, right? The email update endpoint, which did not allow you to modify the is admin.
Correct.
Right? But the registration endpoint did.
True.
Right? So they had a set of guardrails on the email one. Were those just missing on the registration endpoint?
Yes. Now, it's a great question. The quickest answer is yes. The question is why? Well, why did it happen? So a lot of time we see inconsistencies between developers in different teams, or sometimes within the same team. We see inconsistencies with tests. So they're manually instead of automated. They're not as comprehensive, and sometimes these things happen all the time. Okay, the question is, were we able to catch it in time?
Yeah.
So we can see that tests were not done, or not all tests were done. We can see inconsistencies in the design and maybe in the specs, inconsistencies in authorization and authentication. Yeah, I'm trying to keep it simple about it.
Look, I want to thank you for that demo. It's incredibly interesting. Let me bring back our slides from before, because we're going to need to wrap up here soon. And I don't think, Scott, that we've done a full. Oh wait, that's the wrong slide. Where's my slides? Here we go. Wrong one. I want to talk about the assessment that you guys are offering.
Yeah.
And make sure we cover that fully and let people know what's this all about.
Absolutely. So let me talk just a little bit more, because I kind of glossed over what SIS Cyber does. So we are a professional services cybersecurity organization where we really focus on cloud security, application security, and obviously in this context, API security, which is really an offshoot of application security in the way that I look at the world. And that's the reason why we're talking so much about developer activities here. So what we do is provide a lot of assessment work for organizations that are looking to improve the way that they are putting code out into the world, whether it's just a website that's doing a thing or some complex application like an Uber that's like calling cars, and you've got all kinds of connected data and resources and mobile and all that kind of stuff. So we provide not only assessments to identify what the problems might be, but we also do a lot of hand-holding through the remediation process, which is really the differentiator for us, because we're sticky and we like to be close to a customer and really provide that help that I was talking about at the very beginning. A lot of other organizations might do an assessment, throw a report over the wall, and then you talk to them again in a year for another assessment, but you're on your own to fix it. We're there for the long haul. So that's really where we differentiate. What we're doing here with this free mini assessment is using a tool that Dan and his team came up with called Bolt in order to do some light assessment work against your running APIs in your web application. I'll pause there and let Avi talk just for a moment, or Dan, either one of you, about the value that Bolt provides. And then what we're going to do, once you talk about what the tool does, then I'll talk about what we can do with your organization.
Yeah, I'll cover it real quick. Bolt is something we just launched recently. It's still technically in beta, but will be out soon in the Chrome store. It's a Chrome extension. And frankly, it was just the absolute easiest way we could come up with to give you a tool that will watch your traffic, let you sniff around a website, poke around, and it will watch that traffic. It will extract the API calls and the parameters and the payloads and all this kind of details in just an incredibly simple, easy to use thing. Someone was asking about the tool that Avi was using. There's some awesome tools. I think it was probably Burp that you were using. We just wanted to take those kind of capabilities and make them even easier right at your fingertips. And anyone who's interested can come and try it out for themselves. But that's just a little bit of background on Bolt.
Perfect. So what we're going to do in this mini assessment is come in and take a look at this tool with you and help you to interpret the results and identify kind of what should you be focused on next. Do you have a specific problem within your workload, or are some of the things that we're identifying in the way that you've done the architecture for your application or the data that it's sending across, does that start to hint that there are other problems in your organization around how you're developing software? And we can start to explore what that might look like. But the mini assessment is there for us to just be able to start a conversation with you, provide some value using this excellent free tool, show you how to use it and how you can explore your own APIs, and then hopefully we'll be able to provide some value there as well. But at the very least, you're definitely going to learn something that you didn't know before about your own application.
Yeah, Scott, I believe you want to mention that we meet you where you're at, which means
that's right. That's right. Our catchphrase is "We meet you where you are on your API on your cybersecurity journey." And we really mean that, right? If you're already a high-level expert, then you're going to enjoy getting to have some time with Avi in order to really look at what you're doing and dive deep in the way that Dan and Avi did here in this little example chat. If you're a beginner starting out, but you've got a workload that you're responsible for, you're going to learn quite a bit just by taking a look at this tool and learning how to use it. So we meet you where you are. We really do mean it. We want to help you. It's not about us. It's about you. So
yes.
We've got 1
it's
minute
never
left.
Too early and never too late.
That's right. We got 1 minute left. I do want to call out one thing. Please connect with us on LinkedIn. Just if you do, be sure to send a message. I personally do not accept unknown LinkedIn invitations because of the number of scams that are out there, including the largest Bitcoin heist in history, which occurred in February. It was all a LinkedIn recruiter scam run by North Korea. So please, if you're on here, reach out. We'd love to connect with you. Just include a note that says, hey, saw you in the webinar with Dan, whatever. And then I'm happy to connect. Dan, Avi, I'll turn the floor over to you. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Yeah, no, we'll wrap up there. Super interesting session, guys. I think we're just gonna have to do more of these. And you've definitely clarified for me mass assignment and excess data exposure. It was definitely a murky topic. Now I actually see how they are interrelated and also interrelated with BAFLA and BOLA and all these other things. And to the audience, awesome contributions. Those are great comments, questions all the way through. Avi, super cool demo. And Scott, always good to have you adding the color commentary and helping us stay honest in the chat. So thanks everyone. On Thursday, last thing, Thursday we got Katie Paxton Fear. We're going to talk about business logic. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Christine, for that. So yeah, Christine's got these awesome graphics. So we're going to talk about unrestricted access to sensitive business flows. So that is for sure going to be super awesome.
Don't want to miss that. Katie's one of the best in the business.
She's amazing. We got other stuff coming out. Hopefully this week we're going to launch Corey's new course on MCP security.
Ooh.
Oh, you're going to be interested in that. I've just finished watching it myself. It's awesome.
Cool.
But thanks everyone, as always, for being here. Thank you, Avi and Scott and Christine and Julianne behind the scenes, making that all happen. We'll see you
Absolutely.
on Thursday.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
Happy
Thanks,
hacking.
everyone.
Bye-bye.